Good evening and back at it here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, talking Chiefs football. Eric Eager, Sumer Sports, Jeff Chadiha, NFL Network. I am Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. We talk about what we learned from this epic failure of the Kansas City Chiefs at the hands of the Denver Broncos. Or is this just a case of Patrick Mahomes being sick? Are we concerned about Travis Kelce's Friday night trip to watch the World Series and hit the dance club? Any hope for Skyy Moore as a starting wideout? Have the Chiefs been too idealistic in looking at their wide receivers as a whole? Did the Broncos lay out the blueprint how to beat the Chiefs? And will everybody now follow it? How much did the defense miss Nick Bolton? Is KC too aggressive in the return game? What are your thoughts on the game being in Germany with the Dolphins? How good are the Miami Dolphins? And what are our predictions for the game? We talk about it right now here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You're listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro was the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Off and running here on a Halloween evening. If you're catching us via the podcast, we do stream live when we record. It's generally speaking Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. This Tuesday night is a Halloween Tuesday night. And, gentlemen, there's a little conversation in the chat room before things got started as to whether or not we would be in costume. I fault Eager. If I thought there was one of us that was going to actually get that done, I thought it would be Eric Eager. I knew I wouldn't. I didn't think Jeff would. No. Eric, I thought you might. What happened?
I'm off again, on again with the costume. You know, my parents are very religious, and so from like when my parents became,
that has to do with anything.
Yeah, dude, you would expect. But when my parents became born again when I was in 5th grade, we didn't know Halloween. That was apparently part of it from like 5th grade until I was in college, and then I got back on the saddle for a little bit. Now that I have kids, tonight we had a block party, but it was about like 40 degrees in Atlanta, so. I have an interesting relationship with Halloween. Nothing against it, but yeah, when your formative years are stuck going to church gatherings where you bring, bring the candy there, and it's sort of like being an indoor cat versus being an outdoor cat. When an indoor cat, your food's given to you, right? When you're a church Halloween goer, you don't have to hunt for your food the same way that the kids, the true kids have to. So I think I was robbed, Soren.
Jeff, I just wanted a fun little comment about how we got this.
And you got my daddy issues. Good for you,
That's right. We got a little. I thought Halloween was a religious holiday. I thought it had some kind of religious undertones to like All Hallows Eve.
I think it was like. I think my parents thought it was satanic. Like I'm going to be like, so we had that going.
Okay, so Gann Asphalt and Concrete, thrilled to be bringing you this edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Don't know what they can do about your daddy issues, but they can certainly solve your parking lot issues. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear since 1994. I can talk to the fellows. Maybe they can help with some Halloween issues. I don't know. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. It was ugly, Jeff. Is it just that Patrick Mahomes had the flu? Or did the Broncos lay a blueprint? Are there some things here that other teams are definitely going to be able to take and use against the Chiefs moving forward?
Well, certainly Mahomes being sick is a factor in this. They looked bad from the start. That's as bad as they've looked in his time playing here. But, yeah, I felt like this was just an extension of what we've seen, an extreme version of what we've seen as far as the offense goes. I think the defense was okay, but the offense certainly was a disaster from the jump. And look, we saw the receivers be a problem. We saw defenses taking away Travis Kelce. We saw Andy Reid get away from the run game, which had some potential in that contest. And we saw the offensive line give up some sacks and let it turnovers. And it was a perfect storm. You know how I feel about the idea of trap games and them looking ahead. I feel like this version of the Chiefs is a lot more vulnerable. And you saw how vulnerable they were against a defense that had been historically bad before they played them the last 3 weeks. And now they've got one touchdown against that defense. And I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that there are real flaws in the Chiefs' offense, and those flaws came out on Sunday.
Eric, flawed?
This team is no more flawed than they've been the last 5 or 6 years. It just is in a place that we notice it more, which is on offense with Patrick Mahomes.
With Mahomes, not the wideouts, with Mahomes.
No. We see Mahomes, who has been otherworldly for the beginning of his career, right? 2 MVPs, 2 Super Bowls, 3 Super Bowl appearances, 5 AFC Championship game, home games. And I don't think that this team is as flawed as any of those teams. It's just more apparent to us when it trickles down to Patrick Mahomes and not being able to make plays on offense. So, yeah, this team is flawed enough to lose a game like this. They were flawed enough to lose a game like this to Indianapolis last season. I think that, they're always vulnerable to this for sure. I agree with Jeff, and I think the one thing that frustrates me as somebody who is a Chiefs fan and observes the rest of the fan base is this is somehow worse than what we've seen before, which I think that honestly, this was, if we had the defense that we had 2 years ago, this would have been more like the Tennessee game. It would have been 27-3 at halftime. And so even though the rest of the team played poorly, Patrick was clearly sick, and Andy Reid, frankly, and I love Andy Reid, coached down to the opposition. The defense and special teams kept them in it until the very end. So I think that this kind of shows where the Chiefs are from a roster construction standpoint, where their weaknesses are, and the fact that we can all see them is because the weaknesses are in a position that we've grown accustomed to having strengths in Kansas City.
Brad said something interesting. He said, come on, guys, the line is giving him 4 to 5 seconds, and not anyone but Kelce can get open. And I do agree. I mean, that part of the reason they're giving him that time, too, though, is they're dropping 8 a lot, right? They're never coming with more than 4. Maybe occasionally there's a blitz just to, show you, hey, we'll do it. But for the most part, they've kind of taken all the things that have worked for the last few years, and the Broncos have just said, we're going to stay patient. We'll give you the 3. You can drive to this point, but we're not letting you into the end zone, because I think they figured out one, let's cover Travis Kelce. I thought one thing that was indicative or maybe a little bit telling from this game was Patrick Mahomes' postgame comment with this. Were you doing anything different on Kelce? No, I mean, they covered him short a little. Well, no one else was, right? They're covering him short while still dropping everybody else deep and saying, we'll go one-on-one with all your guys. I mean, you almost can, go one-on-one with Kelce with the zone underneath, drop deep, and still play everybody else man-to-man, right? You can almost have a 3-man zone if you drop 8 with man-to-man coverage on everybody else. And I think they've said, look, your guys can't get open. And I think that's pretty apparent, and it shows itself even more at the goal line. Got to be tighter. Patrick Mahomes has always been able to find those spots at the goal line, or when he scrambled, things broke down and guys would get to a spot to where he would hit them. That's not happening. That's the one thing the Broncos have definitely done, Jeff. 1 touchdown in 8 quarters. They got some yards, but the Broncos have definitely figured out how to keep him from getting 7.
Yeah, and like you said, a big factor in this is just and probably because they play them twice a year and they're familiar with them. One, the more you play teams in this league, the more you're going to get familiar with what teams want to run. I mean, no matter how great of a genius your head coach is when it comes to play calling, your offensive coordinator, whatever it is, sooner or later teams see enough of what you do to get a bead on what you're trying to do. And what they've done in Denver, what I saw in that game was a team willing to say, you know what, we're okay with, as you said, dropping 8, taking Kelce away, and seeing if the other guys can beat us. That's something that the Chargers weren't willing to do. In fact, this game was the game I thought the Chargers would play against the Chiefs. Denver was fired up to play this game. They were ready to go. They were in their faces. They were ready to play. But again, going back to the Kelce part of it, they were the first team to say, we're going to keep him quiet and see if Skyy Moore can make a play for you. See if MVS can make a bunch of plays for you. See if Rashee Rice can do it. And they didn't. And so that, to me, I think there is a blueprint now moving forward that they're going to see, which is to say more teams are not going to be as worried about that part of it, that if Mahomes can make a play with those guys, hats off. But right now, after that game, to be honest with you, most of the season it's been that way. Just teams haven't been willing to do it. They're going to have to prove it. Skyy Moore, MVS, Tony, all of them. They got to prove it moving forward.
I think this one's interesting. I mean, Red says, turn the ball over 5 times, you'll lose to anyone. Yeah, but do the turnovers come because you've got a quarterback who gets frustrated and just starts saying, what the hell, no one's open, I'm going to throw it here. And, do they have the answer to not turn it over? I mean, he is barreling towards one of his higher interception totals. I think we all know there's some that are going off guys' hands, but now they're fumbling the ball as well. Cole Hardman fumbling it on the punt didn't help. I do get it. But what about Mecole Hardman says sure-handed, right? Like, why is that getting better? Why is this just an anomaly and not the Broncos said, you guys can't catch?
Yeah.
We'll eventually catch one that gets tipped up in the air. Your quarterback will get frustrated. I mean, I think that's one of the things, Eric, that Andy's got to do is you always like to call the good plays, but call the plays where Patrick Mahomes doesn't get frustrated, right? It seems like there's a lot of stuff that he wants to go down the field and not enough checkdowns, not enough screens, not enough slants, not enough simple let's get in a rhythm and get things going stuff for Patrick Mahomes. If there is, then they're even worse than I think because they can't get open on that stuff either.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this when Mitchell Schwartz was on the show a couple weeks ago where it's like the RPO game has kind of replaced the quick passing game. And I think for wide receivers who are not, and like, look, MVS is a veteran, but he, and I like aspects of his game. He does not have great instincts at the position. Younger players like Rashee Rice, Skyy Moore, Kadarius Toney very clearly don't have great instincts for the position. The RPO game requires your wide receivers to understand space, to understand timing, to understand to have good instincts at the position. And unfortunately, they might have to go away from that and just 1, 2, 3 and throw quick game, like legitimate NFL quick game that can get them first downs and stuff. And I think sometimes Patrick gets bored in that kind of setting. I think, the Jets game was a great example. This past game was a good one where he just kind of like, there are some he's just like, forget it. Let's just throw this thing deep. And like, he doesn't have the guy to go down and get it the way he did when Tyreek Hill was here. So I mean, it's frustrating. I do think Rashee Rice, he was putting together some good games. I think that drop is kind of symbolic of kind of where the Chiefs are as a Super Bowl contender, which is to say it's all there for them to take, but you have to continue to build on what you've put together over the past, 6 or 7 weeks. And Rice dropped that ball that probably would have been a big play and probably put him in position to take a lead in that game. And, that's the kind of stuff that you got to live with, I think, if you're going to build a roster where you kind of sloughed off at the wide receiver position. And so I think it's going to take them all collectively. But make no mistake, like, were you guys inspired by Andy Reid's play calling on Sunday? I wasn't. To me, it felt like a going through the motions type of game for him. And, this is weird, right? Like back in the day, Andy could just kind of like roll the ball out there and they'd have good offense. I think now Spags can kind of roll the ball out there and they can have good defense. But on offense, Andy's kind of got to be on his A game every single game.
Yeah, I think, we do need to keep in mind Patrick Mahomes had the flu, and I think it did affect him. How much? I don't know. I don't know how you quantify that thing, but it did affect him. Jeff, I want to ask you, again, if you're catching us via the podcast, you can be a part of the conversation. We stream 8 p. Central Time on Tuesday nights normally. Sometimes it's Wednesday. But Chet says dropping 8 would have been a great time to run the ball. Only 8 carries for Isaiah Pacheco. Now, you gotta move the sticks to get first downs, to get deeper into the play card. I do get that. And then we did see, 8 touchdowns or 9 touchdowns in 8 games coming down the stretch to Jet McKinnon. And Temecula's like, hey, how about we get him going again? Did he get old? Did they forget about the run? I mean, I know Andy always wants to think that he can throw into any defense, but at some point, if they're going to drop 11, you might want to run.
Yeah, I mean, I think two things going on there too. One, I do agree that Andy gets a little bit too fixated on the things he wants to do, mad scientist type stuff. I got all these plays I want to run, all my personnel groupings, all these things I've been planning for all week long. And so it's hard to get away from that and be a little more practical. And Sean Payton's the same way, to be honest with you. I mean, you saw that he really committed to running the football in this game, but there are moments where he decided I want to try and chuck it around and go pass, punt. It didn't work. But really, in games like this, you do have to put your head down and say, all right, they're giving us this. Let's go ahead and run it. But the Jet McKinnon part of it, I am beginning to think that he has gotten old because he really has not been a part of this offense. And when he has been on the field, he hadn't done anything. And in fact, I can't remember a single play he's had that's been, I would say, oh, man, he looks sharp. He's dropped some balls. He's, he
had a big catch and run call back with a penalty.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
One.
the thing with
Yeah.
McKinnon has more touchdowns through the air this year through 8 weeks than he had last year.
Wait a minute, don't say it.
No, okay. This is Jerick McKinnon last year receiving. 3 for 27, 2 for 4 and a touchdown, 0 for 0, 1 for 1, 2 for 19, 3 for 29.
We know it came in the second half. We know it came in the second, but that's the point. They seem to find it in the second half. Why can't they keep it going in the first half?
Well, I just think, like, look, they're 6-2, the same 6-2 they were at this time last year. And, like, I think that Jerick McKinnon is a card that they're willing to play when the thing has gotten pear-shaped. The one thing that I will say to the question about the run game, the NFL this year has been terrible running the football. If you look at the statistics, like the passing game success rate, now expected points added is a little lower because of turnovers and stuff, but like play for play, passes in the NFL this year are more successful than they were last year on a play for play basis. The run game is 2% less successful, and run game against light boxes is 3% less successful than last year. Like, somehow NFL teams have figured out how to run 6-man boxes and stop the run, and some of that is running backs in this league, all of them held out and all of them suck, right? Josh Jacobs stinks, Tony Pollard stinks, Saquon Barkley stinks. Every back in the league other than McCaffrey and like all the young guys have been awful. But like the NFL, like we have to, like, somehow the league has figured out how to play, like you said, drop 8 kind of coverage, drop 8 kind of fronts and stop the run. And the Chiefs are no stranger to this offensively.
That's true. Listen, you mentioned like McKinnon and how they got to it. Well, Pacheco looks better this year, right? I mean, if you're going to look at it now, it's Pacheco's in for CEH. That's part of it, right? They didn't get around to turning it over to Pacheco until maybe about week 6 or 7 last year. But I do think you do have to call a run. 8 carries for Pacheco is not a commitment to running it. He was a part of the, again, I guarantee if Andy Reid would sit here and talk honestly, he'd say, yes, we had a lot of other things we wanted to do in the run, but we got behind the score, we got behind the chains, we got behind the clock, and we couldn't get to it. I think he wanted to do more, but I think he can do even more than what he wanted to do. And I think there are times when you're light in the box that's what you have to be able to do. Now, maybe we want to talk about this offensive line. It's a little bit of a house of cards. For all their rough and tumble and how big and rough they are, they're brutal at blocking for the run. Brutal.
Yeah, they are. That's true. And I don't know why that is, because you've got some guys who should be better at it. Trey Smith is a mauler. Joe Tooney can be a mauler. Creed Humphrey is a guy who can get after it. But again, I think part of it is just, one, is their identity. They are a pass-first team. 2, when they run, they get into these runs, and it worked last year because Pacheco has great speed, but when you're always running out of the gun, you tend to run sideways a lot. And a lot of times when he's not going downhill, or any running back really, it's a lot harder to get those big runs, to get those 5-yard gains, 6-7-yard gains. And that's, I'm not going to sit here and talk about the ins and outs of play calling, but it feels as if defenses have figured out how to set the edge against this team. They figure out how to attack Pacheco. They probably figured out when they're going to run, which is what point I was making about McKinnon. McKinnon in the game, they are not running the football. That's pretty apparent. Yeah. Now, I remember a game last year against the Raiders when they were down 17-0. He got a carry, and he carried like six guys for like 20 yards and just changed the whole outcome of that first game. Like that McKinnon has not been seen anywhere. And so I think they're a lot more predictable on offense right now, which is surprising.
Not having, you're right, Jeff. I mean, the big thing with McKinnon last year is that he carried the ball, 4, 7, 2, 8, 2, 2, 3 in the first 8 games, which is to your point. The receiving part of it, his game turned down in the second half. But they the big thing for this team, and this was the one thing that I would have been okay with them trading for, although they don't have a ton of picks. The thing that this team lacks is a legitimate NFL running back in the number 2 spot. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is horrendous, and we have to stop pretending that he needs to get the football and stuff. It's bad, right? If they don't go to Pacheco in the run game, who are they going to? Yeah. They have no change of pace back. They have no, they don't have somebody they can hand it to other than Isaiah Pacheco.
We're proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every single project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer, helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Not only does it make a great first impression, a great last impression. It allows you to focus on the business. If you own a business or you're a business manager, find Gann Asphalt and Concrete online at GannAsphalt.com. Let's talk a little bit about Travis Kelce's trip to Dallas, Jeff. You see him on the TV. He's at the World Series. Then there's some video around on social media about him being at a club. He's dancing. He's got a champagne bottle with him. That was Friday night, not Saturday night, right before the game. But this has made the rounds. Is this a concern for the Kansas City Chiefs?
Look, guys go out on Friday nights before games. They go out on Saturday nights, to be honest with you, before games. I don't have a problem with that part of it. The problem I have is that he's got to recognize his profile is a lot bigger now. And you're dating the biggest pop star in the world. And everything you do is going to be a story. It's going to be discussed. It's going to go viral. And so do I think Travis Kelce is affected by that on the field, by what he was doing on Friday night? No. But I do believe that it's bad optics. I do believe that when you have a young locker room, every other person in that locker room feels like, okay, I can do what I want to do. I don't have to be that bought in. And when you're trying to win championships, that little bit of difference between, hey, how focused are you? What do you care about? And how much you're giving to this team. And if you lose some of that, I think it does affect the way you play. I think it does affect the way you go out and operate as a team. And so, I think if he looks back on it, he would say it was a mistake to not be in Dallas or to be in that club, but to be in a place that it was so prominently featured. It was just a bad look.
Yeah, I don't know. I doubt that it's probably any different than a normal Friday, whether it's over at a teammate's house playing grab-ass video games, playing some tunes, whatever. I don't know that it's any different. It's just in public. And when you lose, like Jordan got crap and he won after going down to Atlantic City, right? When you lose, people are going to bring it up. Yeah, I mean, I really don't think it affected him at all, to be honest with you. I don't know for sure. But listen, I know 33-year-old single guys, 25-year-old single guys, go out. It wasn't Saturday night before the game.
Travis isn't single. Travis is taken by one of the most famous women in the world. I feel like I think the issue is, and this happens in every industry, right? Where, there's the issue of people start to get jealous and people start to be like, hey, why is he special? And, the answer should be, well, because he's a Hall of Fame tight end and he's better than you are at what you do, so he has more liberty. But when you lose and you're not productive, then I think that the light shines. I think it's probably fine, but it is bad optics, as Jeff said.
Is the door closed on Skyy Moore developing into a quality wide receiver, Jeff? I mean, you know where I've been. I haven't seen it all along.
I've been open for you.
Yeah. Well, it was open going into last year, but I just, we've talked about it. Size. He doesn't get loose on anyone, it seems like. But I've seen guys, pop in year 3. So I wouldn't cut him if I were the Chiefs. But I do think it's time to stop playing him. I think there are better options. And I know that Andy Reid wants to play everybody, and I think he clearly takes great pride in that. 14 different guys have caught a pass this year. In that game, they targeted 11 guys and 10 guys caught a pass. It seems more like they like checking that box, 10 receivers. How about, 40 completions. Like, let's check that. I don't care if it's to 2 guys, 5 guys, or what, but they seem to be, well, we got these package of plays. I mean, I spent my time at my California summer retreat coming up with these plays for these guys, and I'll be damned, we're going to run it. I don't know. How about some more slants to Rashee Rice and maybe, let Skyy Moore watch a little?
He's definitely drifted into Clyde Edwards-Helaire territory in my mind, in that they are the only ones who see something in him at this stage and are bound and determined to show it to people. And I'm with you. I thought he would be the best receiver in this group, given the way he was talking, the way he was trying to grow and develop, and the work he put in with Mahomes. But it's really hard when you're that small and you're not a burner. And I was talking to Steve Smith. I was in LA a couple of weeks ago. I was talking to Steve Smith, the old Carolina Panthers receiver, about this, and Michael Robinson, who works at the network too. And they were like, unless you're a dynamic at that size, you're not going to be a difference maker. And so you better be somebody who is either amazingly Steve Smith was a very powerful, and fast receiver, and would go up over guys to make catches. Like, Skyy Moore can't do that. He can't be Julian Edelman because he's not that sure-handed of a receiver. He's not that quick in short spaces, and he's, I'm beginning to think he's just in the wrong offense. I think he has talent, but I think he's in the wrong offense for the skill set he has. He'd be better off playing for Sean McVay, or somebody who's going to scheme up ways to get you the football and design different concepts for you and get you 6 or 7 different targets. I was in LA for that Rams-Eagles game, and Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua had like 6 or 7 balls coming their way every possession. Like, he needs that kind of opportunity. In this kind of offense, this kind of system, yeah, I'm closing the door on him.
Eric, what do you see?
I'm willing. I mean, like, look, like there's precedent. Like Devontae Adams, his first 2 years, talking about 6.8 yards
He's
a target.
6'3", 250 pounds.
Devontae Adams is 6'1".
He's
But yes,
6'1".
but like,
He's big 6'1". I'm with
I
you.
couldn't even get
He's
through
a
year 2 before I got dragged here. Devontae Adams, year 2 in Green Bay, 94 targets, 50 catches, 483 yards, 1 touchdown, 5.1 yards per catch, and that was for one of the best quarterbacks who ever played the game in Aaron Rodgers. There's a chance. I agree actually with Jeff. I'm sad that he took me down here before I could finish my point. But I agree with Jeff that, like, he needs to go to an offense where it's 1, 2, 3 throw, 1, 2, 3 throw. And I'm afraid that, like a lot of receivers in Kansas City, other than maybe Rashee Rice, hopefully, that the offense is not definitive enough for him. There's too much, Patrick moving around and you being able to move with Patrick, that I just think he's more of a black and white player.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I think Jeff's on to something that it may just be a bad fit. There is talent there, but we had to comment. It was Terry Reed doesn't design plays to fit his players' skills. I mean, supposedly he does, yeah. And the problem is, I think their skills are easily identifiable, right, and easy to defend. First of all, right now we're at a point of Kadarius Toney runs on the field. There he is, 19. He's getting the ball. Key on 19. Like, he plays 11 snaps and he gets the ball 3 or 4 times, or is one of the options in some kind of option play. Otherwise he doesn't just run a regular route. And it's like they don't trust his hands. They've realized he can't catch, because he was running real routes against the Lions and getting open. He just couldn't catch anything. Skyy Moore runs real routes. He can't get open. And he doesn't really run through any tackles. And so they've got guys, but I think teams do know this is what each of you can do. This is what I'm intrigued by, Jeff. I watched the Broncos safeties. They'd start at 20 and be backpedaling before the snap.
Yeah.
Right? They're way downfield. Isn't there something at 15, 18 yards? If they're that deep, if you're running drags across the underneath, then the front part of the zone's got to step up. And there should be something in between. Even if they're just high safeties, 1 or 2, cover 1 or 2, and they're running some man stuff with them, then you ought to be able to make an outward step and then an instep and get loose at the 15, 16-yard range. Like, they don't seem to be able to find any hole anywhere. That's got to be on Andy Reid, doesn't it? Isn't he not designing routes that find where there's a soft spot?
Well, I think part of the problem is that so much of that space it goes to Travis Kelce, right? I mean, so he's allowed to do so much stuff in the middle of the field where he's, weaving this way, cutting that way, working leverage, working off leverage, and so you're trying to give him the space to operate there. And really, I know someone made a comment about Juju and earlier and where is he at now. One, they got very lucky that Juju was healthy for a full year for most of the year last year. I mean, what he is in New England is what he was coming in to this team last year, which was a guy you didn't know if he could stay healthy. But he knew how to operate in that area along with Travis in a way that these other guys don't. And Eric makes a really valid point that there's so much improvisation in this offense that they're not out there practicing 1, 2, 3 throw. They're not out there trying to figure out how to let's post up again Kadarius Toney or Rashee Rice or whatever to get them going. They do it in the preseason, but there's so much that they want to do, and they have so much faith in all these guys. And we've been saying this for the last 8 weeks. Like, at some point, I would assume you're like, hey, Rashee Rice is our best option here outside Travis. MVS, you can run deep. I mean, I don't know who else you want to throw in there for the third guy, but it's time to stop pretending that all these guys can go out here and make plays. Like, it's just not realistic with this group. And I know they want these guys to develop, but part of the problem is that as well. They're trying to design all this stuff to make it all work in synchronicity. And in fact, they've only got a couple guys who are worth a damn.
Eric, your thoughts on how they can maybe do things differently, do it a little bit better?
Well, I still think they need to consolidate the snaps. And they've done that with Rice, MBS, and Moore. Toney, Hardman. It's a lot of mouths to feed. And I think when we look at each one's individual production, it's not great. And that spurs on some of our distaste for the group. I agree. They need to be more definitive. They need to be more. I mean, there has to be more quick game stuff. They got to. The run game is not. The run game's working okay, but Andy doesn't stick with it very much either. The offensive line is not a great run blocking offensive line, it appears. So I think that they just need to manufacture 5-6 yard plays with the wide receiver group, and that's going to require Andy to just have routes that are going to be known pre-snap. And I think that's bored with Mahomes. But we've seen it. I was at the Vikings game, and there were plays where Rashee Rice got the ball early in the down. MBS had the one against Byron Murphy, and it's those plays you just need to see more of, where it's just you have to have 7 yards. And Patrick, looking for 70 and then checking down to 7, that's worked in the past, but I don't think that that's a very efficient way for them to play offense right now.
Eric's the former receiver here, and I've said this before. How hard is it for a receiver to play X number of snaps and get 3 or 4 to come out of a game with 2 or 3 catches? They're going to carry that stuff with them. I mean, you want to do so much with the opportunities you get, right? That's the mentality of the position.
It's a lonely,
you want the ball in your hands.
Game, man. It's a lonely game when you run. Everybody gets, MBS runs 40 routes and gets 2 targets. That's a lonely game, right? That's a lonely game, and there's value in some of those guys not being frustrated with that and still being able to perform when they get their targets. But especially in 2023, if you're going to play a wide receiver 40 snaps, this guy get 5 targets, 7 targets, something like that, because you're all of a sudden on 4th and 12, expect Skyy Moore to catch a ball in cold weather with a guy draped, not draped on him, but we're all why didn't he come up with that? It's well, he's gotten 2 targets all game. What would it's just not a volume to develop a player either.
I do like this one. Beery Mister says, are they waiting on the bye week to change their approach for player usage? I mean, that is coming up. They've got the Dolphins in a bye week, and then the Eagles on the other side. I mean, the Dolphin game is technically more important than the Eagle game because of tiebreakers and everything. There's no tiebreaker with the Eagles and getting to the Super Bowl. Is that maybe what's going on here? That he's, everything's installed, that he's going to run, and he needs a little more time to get to some counters and options. I mean, I remember talking basketball with Rick Majerus, and he said, listen, this is the time of the year where now you got to counter off everything you've done because now everybody has the tape and they're doing it. Is that part of it? They figured out a little bit of when he starts running everything the other direction, Jeff?
I feel like no, I don't think that's part of it. I feel like Andy Reid, if you look at his history, everywhere he's been, especially in the last few years here, he has an amazing amount of faith and an amazing penchant for overestimating the talents of some players. He did it with Josh Gordon. He did it with Kadarius Toney. Le'Veon Bell came in there and you thought you were getting Walter Payton. LaShawn McCoy showed up. You thought you were getting Barry Sanders. Like, if you listen to the way he talks about players, like, he really believes I've got something great.
But to Jeff, I mean, Jeff, that's a great point. But to Andy Reid's credit, LaShawn McCoy didn't wear a jersey during the Super Bowl in 2019. They started Darrell Williams over Le'Veon Bell in the playoffs when Clyde was injured. Josh Gordon didn't really play much in the AFC Championship game in 2021. Like, I tweeted this out, and a lot of Chiefs fans got mad at me, but like, I'm right. So the great teams in the NFL spend the regular season working through their weaknesses, and the bad teams hide them. That's why when the Seahawks get to the playoffs with Geno Smith, they get taken to the cleaners, or, you know, like Detroit this year. Hopefully not, but like, you know, they're a team like that. You know, Andy does have these opinions, but he is willing to move off of them when it counts. And so that's what gives me a little bit of comfort.
That's interesting. So you're saying you think this is them embracing what their weaknesses are and trying to fix them, that they're so good that they can give up some efficiency in any single game and in an effort to be the best version of themselves in the postseason.
I mean, they're figuring out. I mean, they're not going to be surprised in January, right?
I think that sounds good, and I also think I love what Jeff said. The difference with like the LaShawn McCoys and the Le'Veon Bells and the Josh Gordons is Kadarius Toney's a second-year player.
Yeah,
and they gave up a third, not signed him off the street. Like, that's a big swing and a miss. I'm sorry,
But at this time, I agree. But at this time last year, right, we're talking about them losing and not even covering the spread at home against Buffalo. And what were we talking about? Joshua Williams. Why did they leave Joshua Williams on an island with Gabe Davis? And why did they leave? You know, why did you have young corners in this big game that's going to decide the 1 seed, right? This is what we were talking about last year, right? And then you get in the conference title game and L'Jarius Sneed goes and fits the run and gets injured. And now Joshua Williams has got to play in a real game. And like, you know, they traded Rashad Fenton so that they could get those young corners some time. Like I hate to come off as the homer here or whatever, but this is their, like, when it comes January, they're not going to have these problems. I do not believe they're going to have these problems.
I think they will. I think these are the kind of problems you have.
I think they'll be better, but I think the defense is going to have to be a better defense this year for them.
For sure, but they're not going. We're not going to be like, and the Chiefs lose to San Diego in the divisional round of the playoffs, and Skyy Moore ran 70 routes and had 2 targets. That's not happening in January. I can guarantee you.
I not 70 routes. No. I mean, I think it's becoming clear. If we're talking about it, they'll see it. But I do think it's possible that you're like Patrick Mahomes, only 227, throwing the ball today, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, he fumbled.
And Pacheco runs for 210 or something like that, just because they feel they like.
There's nothing about this team that says he's going to run for 210.
Yeah,
okay? We're not seeing that either.
There was nothing about this team last year that said their defense was going to be really, really good down the stretch. Right? I mean, Jeff, and love Jeff, you have great football opinion, but we were here arguing about semantically whether the Chiefs had a good enough defense to win the Super Bowl this time last year, right? Yeah. Because they had struggled against Buffalo and they're too young and all this stuff. And like they figured it out because they always figure it out.
But I think you're kind of sliding into the other side of the conversation now. I don't think anybody here in this conversation thinks they can't win it.
Yeah.
We're talking about, like, will they win it? And if they don't, what will it look like?
Yeah, but like,
the question we come back to, are the Broncos laying the blueprint out? And I don't know that I think the flaw in the statement is that the Broncos were the first ones to start putting it. No, I think it's a sketch that's been being sketched on by numerous teams for 3 years. And I think collectively the Broncos certainly maybe tied it all together better than anybody else. But we're seeing a lot of teams. They suck throwing the ball past 20 yards. Yeah. It's non-existent. Right? They've clearly figured some things out on them. I think that's the point. Not that Denver started the book. They picked it up at chapter 5 and wrote a couple of good chapters to add to how to stop the Chiefs offense.
But the Chiefs have the most efficient offense in the NFL the last 3 years. Like
not now.
Is that this year?
Not now. They don't.
It's top 5.
I don't know that it is after it was number 4.
Okay, let me make sure I'm going to rbdsm.com, which does sound like a porn site, but it sounds like it stands for runningbacksdon'tmatter.com. They're 5th behind the Eagles, Niners, Bills, and Dolphins. Like I get that. I get what you guys are saying, and I understand that. Like it looks worse than it has in the past at times, but we're still 8 games into a season where they're 6-2. Some of the balance of power on the team has shifted to the defense, and just like all these conversations we've had for years, it's like, yes, we know they have a Super Bowl caliber defense now. The question is can they not? Do they have a Super Bowl caliber wide receiving core? The answer is no. The answer is, can they win a Super Bowl with this receiving core? And I think the answer is unequivocally yes.
I think without a doubt, everybody can have a great day and everybody can have a really bad day. And it's easy to chalk this up to just being a really bad day. All right. But there's also something to be said that you played a team that gave up 70 twice and you couldn't get to 20 once and to 10 another time.
One touchdown.
That's a bad look.
Yeah. Yeah, one touchdown. And that's where I'm at with it. And it's not to say they won't get better, not to say they won't be a playoff team and they won't have a chance to win a championship again. It's just that you look at last year, the margin for error for them winning a championship was very slim, and they were able to thread that needle. And the way it looks now is that the things that they're doing, they could have a key drop, a key lost possession. They're scoring fewer points. I think that their defense is certainly much better and is a top 5 defense right now, but they feel more like a regular team now than they've ever felt in the Patrick Mahomes era.
And I think
they are. So Brad has a message here that says the data would suggest no. The Chiefs are the favorites to win the Super Bowl right now. FanDuel.com/Petro. They are the favorites to win the Super Bowl right now.
Listen, I know, but you also can't be the guy who sits when we say defense. Jeff talks about their defense not being good enough and freaks out and says defense doesn't matter. And now when their offense, I think Jeff's accurate in what he's saying. Their margin for error on offense is a problem, right? It's much slimmer. They can't just be like, oh, well, 5-yard penalty, 3rd and 15, so what? We'll get it. That's not happening. And you can't be the guy that's like defense doesn't matter and now be like, it's all fine. They have a defense. Which is it? Yeah. Otherwise, we're just making
Patrick literally came off the last time Patrick didn't have the flu. He threw for like 300 first half yards. I think that it's just a little more inconsistent than it used to be.
Nick Bolton, do they miss him, Jeff?
Yes. And I'm a big Drew Tranquil fan, and he made some good plays in that game, but I felt as if the Broncos came in that game, we're going to run the football, and that was a hard hat type game. It was the kind of game you needed Nick Bolton to be around. And I imagine, I'm trying to think of who they got coming up next. They got the Eagles after the Dolphins. DeAndre Swift will be a problem. The Bills won't run the football. The Bengals are becoming very dangerous right now. Joe Mixon's getting back in the game. I love Tranquil, but Nick Bolton is certainly a foundational player, a guy who sets a tone for you. And it does matter. I think they missed him a little bit in that game. That they would have won it, anyway with 5 turnovers, but I think they missed his presence a little bit.
I think Tranquil does a great job filling in. Love Tranquil, love his versatility, but they would be better in that game with Nick Bolton. Do you agree, Eric?
Yeah, he's their starting middle linebacker. Like if Tranquil was better than him, he'd be their starting middle linebacker. So I think that Tranquil is a great depth guy. I think Chanel had some really good plays on Sunday. Willie Gay has the tailbone issue, so you saw depth. You for the first time all season, you saw depth. You saw depth issues in the defense for the first time all year, right? At linebacker. He would have been better. They're always like in a weird situation on defense where they're kind of daring the other team to run. And for the first time, basically all season, a team kind of controlled the game wire to wire. And you see, like, the Chiefs aren't great playing from behind on defense like that, right? Where they're kind of getting pushed around a little bit.
The return game. Do we even need to say anything about McCall? I mean, no.
You knew that was a muff from the second the ball came off the punter's foot.
I just love how he tapped his heart, like, it's on me. That was me.
That's my bad.
No shit.
No. Yeah. I didn't know it when it came off the punter's foot, but when I saw him moving towards it, I'm like, this is not ending well. In fact, my buddy Kurt was like, no, before he ever even touched the football. I think we all saw that, where that was going. All right, the game's in Germany against the Dolphins. Good or bad for the NFL, Jeff?
Bad. I mean, this would be a great game in Arrowhead, right? It's
trash
game,
in
right?
Germany.
Yeah. What's that?
But it's trash in Germany for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I love the narrative of Tyreek Hill coming back to Kansas City or playing against his old team. This is a great matchup to determine who can get the advantage and getting that top seed in the AFC. Because 8:30 in the morning, so half the country's not even going to see the game, right? You have to figure no one's getting up in LA to watch a 6:30 football game. But it should be. I'm fascinated by it. I think it's the best game of the week. I know people are talking Cowboys, Eagles, but for me, it really is a litmus test for both teams because it's a chance to see how good the Chiefs defense really is. I know the Dolphins are going to be down probably. I don't know where their offensive line is, but I know their whole left side has been banged up and their center's been banged up. But, they've got some speed. They've got great weapons. They're averaging 35 points a game, so it's a great test there. And it's a great test to see how good the Dolphins really are because they haven't beaten a good team this year. And so I want to see how they match up. I mean, there's some things that happen in that, Broncos game. They didn't throw for a ton of yards, but, Jerry Jeudy and got loose a couple of times. And really, L'Jarius Sneed getting hit for those holding penalties, that's a really ominous sign for a game like this because you can bet it's going to be hard to, get their hands on the Dolphins receivers.
I think the NFL needs to make a decision. By the way, Twin Peaks going to be open at 6A if you want to get your pregame lube on. I'm just saying, a couple of 29-degree man-sized draft beers.
They'll be up.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I think the NFL has to decide this. They're looking at how well the EPL does in America with that early time slot. But what they're not factoring in is that there's no late time slot.
No.
Right? That's because that's what time it is in Europe. And so if you want to watch English Premier League soccer, you got to get your ass out of bed and do it. You don't have to get your ass out of bed to watch football. I mean, maybe if it's your team, all of us in Kansas City and Miami will be up. The rest of the country's not getting up. To this point, near as I can tell, it's not appointment television for the rest of the country. If you're going to play these games over there to promote the game in Germany, and you still want to get the television audience in KC or in America, they got to decide. Either they got to start making traction, and I haven't seen any ratings that suggest this is a growing time slot, or they got to go, you know what, that's too early. That's a shtick, and it's not there for us. You can play the game at 6:30 in Germany too, which would then make it 11:30 over here. Get it the 30-minute start. Played at 7 p.m. in Germany. That's a noon start in Kansas City, a 1 start on the East Coast. Like if you're not getting anywhere with the ratings, stop doing it and just play the game at night in Germany and put it in the middle of the regular schedule in America, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I like the 9:30 start time. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Do you really?
Yeah, I mean, well, this week it's going to be weird because I actually have Falcons-Vikings tickets. So I'm going to be in the Uber watching.
For what?
Well, I know it's a wake. It's going to be the worst game I've ever been to in my life.
Your daddy issues to your Uber TV watching. I call off the jam on that one. You got to be kidding me. Like,
what do you mean?
Like you're not serious. You're watching the game on Uber with Uber on your way to the game.
The game is at 1 o'clock here. So I'm going to watch like some of the Chiefs game at home, like a normal person. Then I'm going to Uber to Mercedes-Benz Stadium and watch the rest of the game while in the car. Yeah.
To watch a team you claim to no longer be a fan for. That's interesting. Are the Dolphins good? How good are the Dolphins, Eric?
They are a top 6 team in the NFL.
Okay. Jeff?
I'd say top 5. Jalen Ramsey coming back. is a huge boost to them. I don't know if he's 100% yet, but if they're able to get Xavier Howard healthy and Javon Holland and put that defense to where they want to get it. Again, this game's interesting too because Vic Fangio has had success against the Chiefs. And so I think if they're able to get that defense going, and their defense hadn't been very good so far, they're going to be a really hard team to beat in the playoffs.
Yeah. That's the question is defensively, like, is this a good or bad matchup for the Chiefs? Do we see them go up and down the field on the Dolphins, Eric? Do you like, or do the Dolphins have the equipment to do what the Broncos did?
So there are two things that the Chiefs that no one's talking about, and I'm happy that this is happening. A, the Chiefs' defensive line is much better than the Dolphins, front five on offense. That is the one thing. Jeff said it right. They haven't beat a great team because whenever they play a great team, they kind of manhandle the Dolphins front. I think the Chiefs' corners are physical. I do agree that the referees, if they're not calling penalties, the Chiefs are going to have a great game on defense because they're going to be able to go up there and chuck the receivers, and the Karlaftises and the Joneses and the Omenehus will kind of, I think, wreck the offensive front of Miami. So they have a huge advantage there. I do think defensively the Dolphins are incredibly overrated. Their linebackers are names as opposed to actual good players. And I think the secondary is still a little bit banged up. So I do think the Chiefs match up pretty well here, and that's why they're favored even in a neutral field.
Yeah, but only by 2.5 points. It is a neutral field, and it's only 2.5 points. I mean, I think that you might have expected that at Miami, I think, based upon the way the Dolphins played of late. We're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best, solving parking lot problems since 1994. It's the first impression your customers and clients will see with your business. It's your parking lot. Make sure it's brightly striped. Make sure you avoid accidents, liability issues. Focus on your business. Don't worry about the parking lot. Let Gann Asphalt and Concrete do that. GannAsphalt.com. Prediction time. Jeff, what do you got?
Oh, it's a toss-up game for me. I'll take the Chiefs. I think coming into this, I thought Dolphins. I'll take Chiefs 24-23. And I'm not comfortable with it, but I feel like after the way they played in this past game, that they'll be more inspired in this contest. But the Dolphins' speed scares the hell out of me if I'm the Chiefs. I think that's a huge issue for them.
All right. Eric?
Yeah, I think the Chiefs win. I think it's probably like 30-23 or something. It's close, but I do think that I do agree with the fact that Chiefs are favored.
Okay. I'm not calling for the beatdown. I've called for that 3 times. I think it happened once. So I'm going to get out of that game. But I do think when they're a mild favorite or a dog, you can't go wrong taking the Chiefs, and I think this is the spot. I also think when they have a bad game, they bounce back. I do think the flu was a big factor in Mahomes really looking sluggish, and I think there's some pride. And I liked hearing a little piss and vinegar out of Andy Reid on Monday. I mean, he called out everybody, said it wasn't good enough. Nothing was good enough, and I appreciate that. And I think that will make a statement to the Chiefs. I'd like to think now. Listen, if they lay a stinker, then I think we've really got something to talk about. But I think they come out, play well, and I don't think the Dolphins' defense can stop them, and I think their offensive line's a problem. I think it was a bad matchup for the Dolphins. The Chiefs get the better of it. Give me the Chiefs 27-17, a touchdown, up 3. They're up 20-17. They get a touchdown to win the game by 10. That's going to do it for us. Remember, if you're catching us via the podcast, we stream live. You can be a part of the conversation Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Central. You can also catch our Too Deep NFL podcast. We stream that Tuesdays at 9. Doug Whaley going to join us, former Bills general manager. We'll be talking NFL football on that podcast. If you haven't downloaded it, do it now. Wherever you get your Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, you can find the Too Deep, TOO, Deep NFL podcast. So for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager, Consumer Sports, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on Red, Gold, and Bold.